The Hindu Editorial concerning sequence. India's vaccination strategy should accommodate for SARS-CoV-2 changes. The spurt in coronavirus cases reported out of China has triggered global alarm. India's health ministry has issued a directive to states to send positive samples to the Indian SARS-CoV-2 Genomics Consortium (INSSCOG) to check for new concerning strains. The health minister too has called for a review meeting of the coronavirus situation in India. India's official number suggests that thus far there is little to worry. There are only 3,408 active cases. Only one district has a test positivity rate of over 10%, and only four between 5 and 10%. As per the latest available weekly data, India's COVID 19 vaccination coverage has exceeded 219.33 crore, and there are no signs of distress being reported out of hospitals. However, the experience of previous years is that it is usually many weeks after which a noticeable spike, let alone a wave, is confirmed by health authorities. There is a scarce monitoring and mask mandates for public gatherings, airports, and railway stations have been removed everywhere. So, low numbers do not necessarily mean new variants are not taking root. In China, despite reports of crowded mortuaries, hospital admissions piling up, and stocked out pharmacies, weekly death counts are officially in the single digits. The prevalent opinion is that the lifting of curbs after almost 3 years of some of the most restrictive containment measures has now exposed a large swathe of people who lack natural immunity. Some mathematical modeling projections calculate a million COVID 19 cases in the coming days in China. Given that much of the world has moved to normalcy in terms of travel, the concern is that this surge is likely to reverberate globally with many more infections, even in India, inevitable. There are two key lessons that can be derived from the Chinese experience. Long lockdowns cannot eliminate the virus or prevent the development of new strains, and the only reasonable defense possible against severe disease is via vaccines. China has largely depended on homegrown vaccines such as CoronaVac and Sinopharm vaccines that rely on the inactivated virus technology. Despite 90% of the population receiving a single dose and half a second dose, the numbers in China suggest that waning immunity is a fait accompli. The big lesson for India is to not only establish the prevalent coronavirus variants but also whether the administered vaccines continue to be efficacious. While most of the vaccines administered in India are Covishield and thus of the spike protein, it may be time to accommodate for changes in the virus. The sequencing of strains by INSSCOG should not remain an academic exercise. Second editorial ties with Taliban. India must curtail Afghan engagement as long as the repressive regime exists. In its latest outrageous decision, the Taliban regime has announced a ban on female students studying in universities. The cabinet meeting decision is one in a series that wipes out the many societal gains since 2001, the last time the Taliban was in power. These decrees include banning Afghan schoolgirls from studying above grade 6, job restrictions, and a ban on women at gyms and public parks, with public floggings for those traveling without male relatives chaperoning them. In effect, a regime that is growing crueler and less rational by the day wants about half the country's population out of public sight. Making the decision publicly and officially is the regime's way of thumbing its nose at the international community by reneging on promises made during the Doha talks, including establishing an inclusive government. The international community must now review its current policy towards the Taliban 2.0 regime. While no country recognizes the Taliban officially, many openly engage with the regime leaders. More than a dozen, including India, have diplomatic missions. The government has sought to explain its decision to go back into Afghanistan and to even meet with ministers such as Sirajuddin Haqqani, who were responsible for attacks and killings at Indian missions, as pragmatic policy to ensure India's security and the smooth delivery of aid. In fact, these policies have only made it more comfortable for the Taliban to continue to rule, while giving shelter to terrorist organizations, including those that target India. In addition, New Delhi's decision to cancel all visas to Afghans hurt female students seeking an education in India the most. Instead of pleading helplessness, there is much that the global community can do, acknowledging that women's rights are at the core of the issue with the Taliban and not just a desirable outcome that is optional in Afghanistan's future. It must curtail engagement with the Taliban, which depends on external assistance to run its government structures. Leading nations should also create platforms outside Afghanistan for non Taliban Afghan leaders, particularly women who had been elected in the past, to regroup, organize, and voice an alternative vision to the dark one the Taliban seems set at thrusting the country into. India, as a regional leader, must review its hands off approach to the people of Afghanistan who have clearly suffered many deprivations in the past year. Lofty words at the United Nations Security Council and other international fora have done very little to alleviate those hardships and even less to further India's interests or goodwill amongst a people that it has historically been seen as a good friend to. Thank you.